Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Keezy Gamer. I want to thank all of you who decided to listen to my read through of the saltierthancrait Reddit post leak. The post has a source describing how Disney treated J.J. Abrams during the production of The Rise of Skywalker. I feel this is an important post that all lovers of franchises need to be aware of. Corporations are taking these IPs and not respecting the creatives and fans. They abuse our love and nostalgia for these franchises and expect us to support the narrative they want to use that makes shareholders money. Below are the links to the Reddit post for you to read yourself and support the leaker's narrative. Excuse my down NPR style voice, for I'm new at doing these kind of videos. If you are enjoying my content, please like and subscribe, and I look forward to bringing you more news on this situation. Since shortly after release weekend, I've been corresponding with someone who worked closely on the production of The Rise of Skywalker and works for one of the major companies I cannot disclose here. I have verified the source to my satisfaction. To protect the source, I'm rewording what we spoke about over the last 2 weeks, and I'm submitting it to you in bullet point format I have written based on what they have told me. The TLDR is that they were upset with the final product of The Rise of Skywalker and wanted to share their perspective on how it went down and where it went wrong. The leakers for The Rise of Skywalker had an agenda and are tied to Disney directly. My source confessed that they have an agenda as well, in that they struggle with ignoring what's been happening to someone who they think doesn't deserve it. JJ always treated everyone on and off set with respect, so my source's agenda is that what Disney has done to JJ and how much they screwed him over should be something people are at least aware of, whether you like him as a filmmaker or not. Disney was one of the studios who were in that bad robot bidding war last year. Disney never had much interest in BR as a company, but they did in JJ because they saw Warner Brothers, who JJ went with in the end, as a major threat. JJ is very successful at bringing franchises back like Mission Impossible, Star Wars, and Star Trek. Warner Brothers is struggling with DC, and aside from Wonder Woman, DC is still seen as a bit of a joke in the current state by the GA. Warner Brothers wants Abrams for some DC projects. My source said that this generation's Star Wars is the MCU, and Marvel's biggest threat is a well-operational DC. They want to keep DC in the limbo that they are in right now. Abrams jump-starting that franchise with something like a successful, audience-pleasing Superman movie makes them nervous. Their goal is to make JJ look bad to potential investors and shareholders. My source mentions this shortly after the premiere. The Rise of Skywalker we saw last night was not the Rise of Skywalker we thought we worked on. JJ was devastated and blindsided by this. He's been feeling down over the last 6 months because of some of the ridiculous demands Disney had that changed his movie's story. While the scenes were shot, a lot of the changes were made in post-production, and the audio was re-recorded and altered. My source said they've never seen anything like this happen before. He's the director, and he wasn't in the know about what they were doing behind his back. Apparently, JJ felt threatened over the month leading up to the premiere. Ryan was never meant to do episode 9, despite some rumors that he was. JJ was brought back by Iger, not Kathleen Kennedy. Disney insisted on more fan service, less controversy. JJ's original agreement when he signed on was indicating he would have way more creative control than he did on The Force Awakens. It became evident that this wasn't the case only a couple of weeks into shooting when the trouble with Meddling started. JJ wanted to do some scenes he thought were important, but Disney shut it down, citing budgetary reasons. May 2019, JJ argued that those scenes were crucial. He had to let go one of the scenes. The other scene he insisted on was approved at first. He did reshoots and additional photography in July. The new scenes were shot at BR in October. The ending that will blow your mind was a part of this. Older actors were included like Hayden, Ewan, and Samuel, and anyone who wasn't animated. The Force Ghosts weren't meant to be voices because they shot that footage on camera. The actors were in costumes. Rey was supposed to be surrounded by the Force Ghosts to serve as sort of a barrier between her and the Sith surrounding them. My source thinks, but cannot 100% confirm, that this is because of China. It's an official talk of sorts. Some VFX people claim they got a list of approved shades of blue they could use on the Luke Force Ghost. Cutting this out was when the bad blood turned into a nightmare for JJ because the movie he was making was suddenly unrecognizable to him in almost every way. My source knows JJ well enough to know that he's just not the yelling type, but apparently in a meeting he yelled something along the lines of, "Why don't you just put directed and written by Lucasfilm then?" My source wasn't present for that exchange, but knows someone who were. Disney demanded they shoot some scenes that would have things in it for merchandise. They Fly Now is one of them. It also's JJ's least favorite scene. At a November screening of a 2-minute and 37 cut, he cringed, groaned, and laughed when the scene was on. I did the same thing too when I saw that scene. My source says that JJ was most likely not joking when he said, "You're right," in the interview where they asked him about the Rise of Skywalker criticism. JJ's original early November cut was 3 hours and 2 minutes long. In January, JJ suggested that they turn this movie into 2 films. My source told me this well before Terrio mentioned it in an interview a couple of days ago. When Disney said no, JJ was content with making this 3 hours long. Over a period of 9 months, JJ started realizing that one by one his ideas and whole scenes were being thrown out the window or entirely altered by people who have no business meddling with the creatives. They were not on the same page when it came to creative decisions, and it became obvious that Disney had an agenda in addition to wanting to please shareholders. Disney could afford messing up 9 for the sake of the bigger picture when it came to protecting things unrelated to 9. The cut JJ eventually and hesitantly agreed to in early December was 2 hours and 37 minutes long. It wasn't the cut we saw, which he wouldn't have approved of, and which is 2 hours and 22 minutes long. Apart from the Force Ghost, there were other critical and emotional scenes missing. The cut they released looked chopped and taped back together with weak Scotch tape. JJ's words. The movie opened with Rey's training. Her first scene with Rose was shortly after Rey damaged BB-8 during the training. Rose made a silly joke about how Poe was going to kill her for damaging BB-8. There was a moment where Rey took a minute to process what just happened when she saw that vision during training. She looked distressed and worried. The next scene was noise as the Falcon was landing and Rey runs over there. Those 2 women who kissed at the end were visible in this shot, and they were holding hands. One of them ran towards the Falcon as it landed. Kylo and Mustafar's scene was 2 minutes longer. There was a moment where Kylo seemed a bit dizzy and his visions was shown as blurry for a second, almost as if time half stopped while everyone in the background was slow-mo fighting. Kylo hears Vader's breathing, then shakes his head, and time goes back to moving at a normal pace, and he jumps right back into the battle. The scene from the trailer where he knocks that guy down, which did end up in the movie later. They cut some of the scenes from the Lightspeed skipping segment. Some of the planets that were cut were Kashyyyk, Naboo, and Kamino. The The scene where the TIE fighters are chasing them through the iceberg, those corridors were inspired by a video game JJ used to play in the 90s called Rebel Assault 2. The third level in the game with the tunnel on Endor specifically. Janna was confirmed to be Lando's daughter. Rey not only healed Kylo's face scar, but she killed Kylo when she healed Ben. Kylo ceased to exist when Rey healed him. My source mentioned that some people assumed it was Han Solo who healed him, but that isn't true, and that wasn't Han Solo. That was Leia using her own memories as well as Ben's to create a physical manifestation of his own thoughts to nudge him towards what he needed to do. That was her own way of communicating that with him. And it wasn't possible without her dying in the process. She made the ultimate sacrifice for her son, and this flew over people's heads with the Disney cut. The late November cut, the last cut JJ approved of, had scenes with Rose and Rey still. JJ wanted to give her a more meaningful arc. Disney felt that was too risky too. My source mentioned that Chris Terrio said that it was because of the Leia scenes, but this is only particularly true because she had 4 other scenes, including 2 with Rey, Daisy, that Leia was not in. Finn wanting to tell Rey something was always meant to be force sensitivity. In the 3-hour cut, it explicitly stated there was a moment where Janna and he were running to the top of the Star Destroyer, and Finn needed to unlock or move something that he force moved, and it acted surprise when it happened. This was replaced with the CGI BB-8 fixing whatever he needed to fix on there. Babu Frick was nearly cut because some execs at Disney thought he would be the new Jar Jar. They are really surprised that people loved him this much. He was JJ's idea and was created in collaboration with some artists and puppeteers. The personality was all JJ. There were a bunch of scenes where Rey and Kylo separately went through quiet moments of reflection to deal with what they were going through. On her part, her going through the realization that there's something sinister about her past. Him going through regret and remorse but trying to shut it out. My source said that the Kylo scenes were especially amazing because of Adam's performance and how he managed to portray that inner turmoil. It provided much more context and added deeper meaning to both his battle with Rey and the final redemption arc at the end. It didn't happen so suddenly, and it was more structured than we got. The Kylo Rey scene where he dies was at least 4 minutes longer with more dialogue. Ben was always supposed to die. Source also added that if he wasn't, then that might have been in an earlier draft, which they haven't read. The first draft they read included Lando. The first few didn't. The Reylo kiss and Ben's death was not part of the reshoots. It was part of the re-editing. Even the cut that JJ thought was coming out earlier this month had a longer version of that scene than what was shown in the theatrical cut. JJ was against the Reylo kiss or Reylo in general. This was Disney's attempt to please both sides of the fandom. JJ was not happy with where The Last Jedi took the story. The final result is a mix of that story and the story told by Disney and whoever they tried to impress. Certainly not the fans. JJ is gutted over the final result. Star Wars means a lot to him. He had to sacrifice large chunks of the story in The Force Awakens, but he was promised more creative control on The Rise of Skywalker, and instead the leash they had him on was only tightened as time went by. A source said that this is the one franchise and the one piece of his work that he didn't want to mess up, and instead it turned into his worst nightmare. When he found out that he was blindsided with the cut they presented, he said, "What the F?" When Kylo was fighting the Knights of Ren at the end, and the Williams music that was used for it was not what he wanted at all. He seemed to think it was out of place. JJ's cut still exists and will always exist. We most likely will never see it unless someone accidentally leaks it. Edit. I forgot one thing that the source wanted included concerning Finn Poe in The Rise of Skywalker. The source asked about Finn Poe after seeing Oscar Isaac's comment about how Disney didn't want it to be a thing. This is true. JJ fought to make this happen. This is why Oscar is blaming Disney. It's not just a random throwaway comment. He knows for a fact that it was Disney because these discussions happened. The main cast is insanely close with JJ and are just as pissed, though seemingly more outspoken about it than JJ. During The Force Awakens, Disney was hesitant to hire John Boyega because a woman was front and center, so they deemed that risky enough. So bringing in a male lead who's black made them nervous. JJ fought to make that happen for about 9 months before getting approval. The same issue came up when JJ fought to have Finn and Poe in The Rise of Skywalker, but he lost that battle, as he lost many creative battles for this film. Many people, JJ included, came to the realization during this production that the story really is told by shareholders, investors, instead of the creatives or anyone at Disney specifically. He tried to make a lot of things happen and was shut down because of this. They had him on a leash, and many blame The Last Jedi for the stricter creative approach. So clarifications about my Rise of Skywalker post and statement from my source. I'm making this post at the request of my source to answer a few questions, since it's impossible to answer the many questions in the leak post itself. For those asking how I verified who this source was, I know their name. I have seen their business card and ID badge. I have seen documents, folders, and forms related to their work, including non-Star Wars projects. I have seen photos taken at studios and events, some complete with EXIF data that corresponds to established production timelines. I have seen bank statements confirming production-related activities. I have seen correspondence between my source and others at this company. In total, I feel I have enough to make a post on Reddit based on the source alone. My source strongly disagrees with certain aspects of the STC and the fandom menace. They reached out to me specifically because we had a prior contact unrelated to STC or Star Wars, and they trust me to pass their information on. I made the decision to post on STC because of my mod chip there. From the source regarding the question of JJ disliking the kiss. JJ didn't like the kiss, but had to include something along those lines. They settled for what to show, but that doesn't mean he liked it. He absolutely did not. He's the guy who donated 1 million to Time's Up. He was vehemently against Reylo for this reason. Originally, in the summer of 2017, he was told that Reylo doesn't have to be a thing. but one of the few big fandom things that came out of The Last Jedi was Reylo. That part of the fandom exists since The Force Awakens, but The Last Jedi really skyrocketed that. That's when Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy specifically, became adamant about including it. So Marianne saying that means that, yes, they decided to include that one scene, but there's different cuts of it. Some showing a bit more of that with some dialogue before he dies. The following is from the source directly, which they gave me permission to post on their behalf. I'm surprised the media is even commenting on it to refute all this, because even the way they're wording this is flat out laughable and makes them look like they're trying to cover it up behind ridiculously over the top and mentioning buzzword sentences like tinfoil hat and conspiracy. We live in a fake news world now, and we're all aware that the media now has an agenda. Investigative, unbiased journalism is a rarity only few publications can afford. It'd be one thing if they denied something film related, but they cannot, literally cannot, have irrefutable evidence about something related to business mess only a few would be aware of. This isn't something an average Joe tied to a project can know. This isn't something JJ would come to you and mention willy-nilly. This isn't something the actors can freely speak about, though I'm surprised about Dominic a bit. Disney is so much bigger than the glimpse the media gets to see and hear about. Peter Sharita, who I actually adore and have ironically met on a number of occasions, with all due respect, cannot be in the know about things like this no matter how you spin it, no matter how good he thinks his sources are. He simply cannot. I think we should all be cautious in what we believe in. This goes for what I am saying as well. I have no qualms in admitting that I come from a biased place and that I have an agenda as well. My agenda is to fight a genuinely massive force that's trying to control a narrative in such devious ways. Anyone saying, but JJ is an established powerhouse. Bless you, but he is an ant compared to Disney. Disney, a company that used him merely as a tool and tossed him when they no longer liked the decisions that he made. Decisions outside of Disney and decisions that Disney had no business sticking their nose in. I could say much more. I want to share more with the world, but that would mean throwing some people I care about under the bus, getting them in trouble. I cannot do that, nor can I put them in a position where they will feel pressured to go against what they believe in by saying something they're asked to say. I always knew this was a lose-lose scenario in terms of credibility. That's not news to me. I'd be naive to think otherwise. Planting the seed is the only thing I care about for now. The Reddit post ends with, while I have proof of who my source is, I do not have proof of many of their claims. I have chosen to trust them based on our prior interactions. I hope that they will be able to share more in the future. Thank you for reading, and may the Force be with you.